Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. My name is John. I'm a member of the UConn Quality Team. I'm joined by Jean Marie, another team member. She will monitor the chat and help answer questions. Thank you for joining us today. This is an optional meeting, and we know your time is valuable, so we'll try to make this as helpful as possible. Before we get started, I would like to know how many of you had a chance to review some of the UConn materials that were referenced in the invitation email. It's okay if you didn't, but please let us know in the chat if you had time to review any of those materials. Just type yes or no in the chat. Okay, I see some responses coming in. All right, very good. I see a number of you did get to have a look at those. That's not necessary for this webinar, but I just wanted to know what sort of background everyone had. Our plan for today is to give you an overview of the qualifying exam and to review some of the basic concepts you will be tested on. We will also do some practice tasks like the ones you do on parts 2 and 3 of the exam. Please feel free to ask questions. I know your mics are muted, but you can type in the chat box. We might not be able to answer all the questions as you post them, but we will save some time at the end to circle back to anything that was not addressed. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, I want to tell you just a little bit about Project UConn. It is a long-standing project. It's been around since 2009. I myself, in fact, most of the people on the quality team started off as raters. And one of the features that we all like best about it is the wide variety of tasks that you do. So it doesn't get boring. You're always doing something a little bit different. There's always some new sort of thing coming along to learn. Of course, you get to choose your own work times, which is also very convenient. And it is a work from home job. Now, just because you're not coming into an office, that doesn't mean that you're all on your own to do the work. We have a very engaged rater community. We have 2 social groups, chat groups. One is just for socializing, and another one is actually for discussing the job itself. So you will not be on your own. You will get to know some of your coworkers, and you get to work with them and get help from them. But of course, you're all here today because you're preparing for the qualifying exam. So let me give you a quick little overview of what that test is like. It's a 3-part exam. Part 1 is theoretical. It asks you questions about the rating concepts, whereas parts 2 and 3 are practical. You'll be given tasks like the ones that you would do if you were a rater. And so you'll be applying that theory that you were tested on in part 1. Now, we have collected some tips from people who've successfully been through the qualification process, and we'd like to share a few of those with you now. And first and foremost, which is very obvious, but it bears repeating, this is an open book test. You can use any of the training materials during the exam. In fact, it's probably going to be necessary to reference those materials while you're taking the test. The primary resource that we recommend that you study before the exam are these study guides. There's a page quality and a needs met study guide. This little video shows you what the page quality guide looks like. It's actually a lot like this webinar. It's an overview of rating concepts, and then some practice tasks and some quizzes to help you check your knowledge. And like I said, there's one for page quality and for needs met. And I would really urge you to go through both of them before you take on those sections of the exam. Now, the general guidelines will be your main source of reference. The guidelines is a PDF. It's also available in an online version. It's a very lengthy document, but it is a comprehensive source of information about everything related to working on Project UConn. So here's where you'll find in detail all of the different rating concepts and rules and guidelines. It's a long document, but it does have a table of contents at the beginning to help you find specifically what you're looking for. And of course, you can always use the Control F function to find a particular term that you might be looking for, like you see over here on this side of the screen. This is definitely a document that you'll want to have to reference while you're taking the exam, because you're going to find lots of terms and ideas that you'll want to look up real quickly to sort of refresh your memory on. Now, we have more resources than this on our candidate resources page, which looks something like this. This is just a screenshot of a part of the page. It actually has some advice and tips and tricks and all sorts of things that you'll want to have a look at. I just right now want to point out to you these simulators for both page quality and needs met. That's parts 2 and 3 of the exam. These are practice tests, and they're very much like the ones that you would do on the exam. So our recommendation is that you try these before you attempt that section of the test. In fact, let me go ahead and post the link to this resources page. And it probably was included in one of the emails that you received, but just in case you didn't get it, I just posted the direct link to this page. Now, you have a 7-day window to complete all 3 sections of the exam. And I know that sounds like a lot of time, but please don't wait until the end of that period to start. We recommend that you begin within the first couple of days and that you set aside 2 or 3 hours per exam section. It probably won't take you nearly that long to complete any section of the test, but it would be great to have that amount of time available, because you might want to stop and go back and review materials at some point, or maybe something just comes up and you can't complete it in one session. So having a 2 or 3 hour block of time is going to be really helpful. I would plan on completing about 1 section of the exam per day. And again, if you need to stop for any reason, even if you just want a break, just select Submit and Stop from the bottom of the page, and that will save your progress so you can come back later and pick up right where you left off. If you don't pass the first time you take the exam, I wouldn't worry too much about that. You'll probably be given an invitation to attempt a second chance at it. And not everyone passes on the first try. It is very challenging. But the good news is, like I said, you'll probably have a second chance at it, and the retake is sometimes a shorter version of the exam. Now, part 1, the theoretical part, is made up of true-false questions that are all about the rating concepts. This is information that comes straight out of that document called the General Guidelines. This is an example of what a question looks like. You'll have a question stem and then several statements below it, and you'll mark either true or false for each one. And each one of these statements are independent of the other one. So you could very likely have some mixture of true and false, instead of in our sample here where they're all true. But after you pass this theoretical section, that's when you go on to part 2, which is dedicated to page quality. This is something that we're going to practice in just a minute. And then part 3 is about needs met tasks, which we will wrap up today with some practice tasks from that section. Keep in mind that you must pass each section before advancing to the next one. So when you complete a test section, keep an eye on your inbox for another email that will tell you the results and will have a link to the next section. In fact, also keep an eye on your spam inbox. For some reason, that email seems to get misdirected into the spam folder. Now, you will need a mobile phone for section 3 of the exam. For the first 2 sections, you'll be able to do those on your desktop. Now, I know that's a very quick and brief overview of the process, and there may be questions or concerns that come up once you get started. Don't hesitate to send in an email. Just go to your Appen Radar Labs login, look for the Project Tickets tab. You'll then click the link titled, "Do you need help with the project?" and that will open up a support ticket. Appen gets several thousand emails a day, so it'll really help if you put UConn in the subject line. And if you're asking about this webinar, you could even put UConn qualification webinar in the body of the ticket. And that would just help our filters find your email and route it to the quality team. Okay, so before we actually get into the exam concepts, I'm going to pause for just a minute to see if anyone has a question about what we have covered so far. Okay, I don't see any questions coming in just yet. If you're in the process of typing one, go ahead and finish typing and we'll get to it. But for now, we're going to move on to this part 2 of the exam, which is about a concept called page quality. Page quality is a rating that is applied to individual web pages. It's a measure of how well that page accomplishes a beneficial purpose. This rating scale that you see on the screen is the one that we use for page quality rating. There are 5 categories from highest down to lowest, although in between ratings like low plus and medium plus are also possible. The definitions that you see here, they all come out of the general guidelines. And I know that these are very brief, and as you're going to see, there's much more to it than just these brief definitions. But this is still very helpful, and it's a great way to think about your score. I think one helpful perspective is to start with medium. A medium quality page has a beneficial purpose, and it achieves that purpose. So once you make that determination, you can start to do your quality checks and to put a precise rating on it. So if a page has a beneficial purpose and it achieves it, it's probably going to be medium. And then based on the various quality checks, it might go all the way up to highest. If it doesn't achieve that beneficial purpose, or it only partly achieves it, then it's probably going to be somewhere below medium. And keep in mind that there are highest and lowest quality pages of all different types and purposes. So don't make any assumptions based on the type of page that you load. It is really all about the purpose of the page and how well it accomplishes that purpose. Now, we do have a number of resources specifically for page quality rating. And I already showed you the candidate resources page. One of the resources linked there that I want to highlight is this UConn search decision tree. We have a decision tree, which is an online flow chart for both page quality and needs met. And works very simply. You answer a series of questions about the page under evaluation. And as you answer those questions, you adjust the rating. And at the end, it brings you to a recommended score. This is not a replacement for the general guidelines or the study guides. It's just a helpful tool. And I would suggest at least trying it out on those simulator practice tasks that I showed you a minute ago. And even if you don't end up using this regularly as a rater, it's still very good for learning the process and getting an understanding of the rationale behind the various rating categories. Now, for our practice today, we're going to talk about these 5 key concepts. In fact, you could even think of these concepts as steps that you would take in the rating process. And to help illustrate it, let's look at these concepts in connection to a particular web page. So this little video over here is the page we're going to evaluate. It is a Yelp review page. I know you're probably familiar with that website. It's a very popular site. Well, step 1 with any task is to determine the purpose of the page. And here the purpose is very clear, is to provide information about a business. And in this case, we can really see at a glance that it is helpful for that purpose. It has lots of information like the business address, the phone number, the web address, and we have hundreds of reviews about it as well. Now, it's important to note that a rating is not really about how the page looks. In this case, the page looks great, it's very professionally done, but that's not what we're basing our rating on. We're basing it on how well it accomplishes that purpose. So I think we've determined enough that the score is probably at least going to be medium because it accomplishes a beneficial purpose. Now we're going to apply some of the other quality checks. And for our third concept, we're going to consider whether or not this falls into a category called your money or your life, or YMYL for short. Your money or your life are topics with a high risk of harm because they could significantly impact health, financial security, safety of people, or the well-being of society. I know those are very broad categories, and there are lots of subcategories in there that at times may qualify as a YMYL topic. So, for instance, on our graphic, things like there are legal issues, news, current events, in some cases could be your money or your life. A good example of a topic that, depending upon the context, may or may not be, would be a weather report. A report about a dangerous hurricane that's about to make landfall. That could be your money or your life because it has the potential for harm if the article is inaccurate. Whereas a typical weather forecast that just says, right, what the temperature is going to be, that doesn't really have the potential for harm. If you search for this term in the general guidelines, you'll find a really helpful list of examples of what is and isn't your money or your life. In the case of this page that we're evaluating, you may be tempted to call it your money or your life because it is related to shopping and purchasing. It could influence a decision to spend money, but shopping results typically are not considered your money or your life because they usually don't have that potential for significant harm. So this page doesn't fall into that category, but it's important to remember that every page, regardless of its classification, has a requirement for what we call EAT. EAT, which stands for experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trust. Every page has to have enough EAT for its purpose. And in this case, even though it's not your money or your life, I think most people would want to know that this is accurate, right? Because the wrong address, for instance, could be very inconvenient, or reviews that were misleading, right? That could lead to a bad purchase decision. When we look over this page, we find lots of evidence of all of these here. For example, experience. We have hundreds of reviews from people with firsthand experience with the business. And even though they might not be experts, if they have been to the store, if they have done business with it, they certainly have a point of view and an experience that would be worth sharing, right? That users would want to know about. And the fact that we have 444 of them is a really good sign. We also have expertise and authoritativeness on this page because this particular listing is a claimed listing, which is to say that the business itself has taken responsibility for the accuracy of some of the information here, like the phone number and the address. So when you put all that together, we have a more than adequate level of trust. Most people would trust this page for its purpose. Certainly they trust the people who created the content. Our final consideration here, reputation, this brings into the reputation of the website itself. And in this case, Yelp has a positive reputation. It's known for this type of content, and it is generally considered trustworthy. So when you add up all of these factors, a page with a beneficial purpose, it's very helpful for that purpose, and has adequate EAT, we have a rating on this page of medium plus to high. And actually, I think high is a really good rating for this page because it fits that definition well of beneficial purpose accomplished well. Now, I gave you a range. I said medium plus to high, and that's often what you're going to find, that more than just one specific score is allowed. So in this case, a range was allowed. So either medium plus or high would have been considered a correct answer. And that range is in there to accommodate different points of view. So it may be that some people don't think that this user submitted information is quite trustworthy enough for the high rating. So they allowed a little bit lower. But again, if we go back to that definition of medium, part of which was the page is nothing special but nothing wrong, we can see how it wouldn't fit medium very well. Because a claimed page with this much authority and with hundreds of reviews, that is a little special, right? That is definitely above the average review page. Well, those are the concepts that we're going to use in our practice task. I'm going to pause again for just a minute in case someone wants to ask a question about one of those key concepts. Okay, I don't see any questions coming in yet, so let's jump right into our first page quality example. And actually, that was not the page I wanted. I wanted this one, this Amazon page. And I just posted a link to it. If you would, please open up that link. You should see the image that's on your screen here once you load the page. And as you're opening that page and having a look at it, I'm going to give you a question to think about. The purpose of this page is pretty obvious. It's to give users information about Amazon Prime. Does this page achieve its purpose? Yes or no? Please answer in the chat whether or not you think this page achieves its purpose. If you're not sure, just take your best guess. You can type either A for yes or B for no into the chat, please. And I know I'm probably kind of rushing you through these tasks today. On the exam, you have unlimited time to complete each task or question. But today, I'm going kind of quickly because I want to get through a number of examples. Okay, so the best choice here would be yes. This page definitely achieves its purpose. It has lots of information about Amazon Prime and even a link if you want to join it. So it is very helpful for its purpose. So that was step one. We know that the page achieves a beneficial purpose. Now I want you to think about those quality checks that we did and try to assign a rating to this page. And to help you out here, we have our rating chart and definitions again. So I'm going to leave this on the screen for just a minute, and then I'm going to launch one of our survey questions so we can all take a vote on what the best score for this page would be. Okay, looks like most of our votes are in. And we had the most popular choice was highest, and that is actually within the accepted range. Anything from high plus to highest would be acceptable for this page. And if you look at the definition for highest, I think you see a really good fit. Highest quality pages serve a beneficial purpose, and they achieve that purpose very well. And the reason that it would be all the way up here at the top is because of the EAT, the expertise and authority and trustworthiness of the page. Amazon.com is the ultimate authority on their own service, Amazon Prime. So there really is no other higher authority on that topic. And this is what you're often going to find, is that the top end of the scale, the high plus to the highest score, it's usually reserved for those pages that are uniquely authoritative on the topic, or they have some special level of expertise. Okay, let's try another task. Okay, so I just posted the link to this page. It is a lyrics page. If you would, please go ahead and open that up. And while you're looking at it, I'll give you a question to think about. This, a true-false question. This page has high EAT, expertise, authoritativeness, trustworthiness, and trust. Is this a high EAT page? True or false? Okay, the best choice here would be false. We wouldn't consider this to be a high EAT page. Now, that doesn't mean that it's totally untrustworthy, but a high EAT page would be one in which we knew who created the content, one in which we knew something about the reputation or the expertise of the content creator. In this case, we have a page with user-submitted lyrics, and so we don't really know who sent it in, and it's difficult to make a judgment about the expertise or whether or not these are really accurate. So we would not call this a high EAT page. Let's try to put a rating on it. Now, we have a page with a beneficial purpose, and I think you've probably seen enough of the page to make a judgment about it being at least partially accomplishing that purpose. So I'm going to launch our survey question, and we'll take a vote on the best page quality rating. Okay, looks like our scores are in, at least most of them are. And the most popular choice was C, medium plus, and that is indeed within the accepted range. And you see it's a pretty good fit for medium. It has a beneficial purpose. It did achieve that purpose. It provided the lyrics, but it's really nothing special, nothing wrong. There's no special expertise or authority here. And this page, it has a mix of high and low quality characteristics. For instance, at the time that that page was rated, one of the videos on the page was broken and wasn't working. And even though that's not directly related to the main content of the page, that's what we call supplementary content, it's still a low quality characteristic. Probably the most important consideration here was the somewhat questionable EAT, not being able to know who submitted the lyrics and not being able to make a judgment about their expertise or authoritativeness. And that's why the range extended all the way down to low plus. And this wide range here from low plus to medium plus is allowed, again, to accommodate different opinions on exactly how trustworthy this page would be for the purpose of providing song lyrics. Okay, so those were a couple typical page quality tasks that you're going to see on the exam. Let's move on to part 3 of the test, which is needs met. Now, with needs met, we're not just evaluating a page on its own merits. We are evaluating a page in the context of a search query. So you will be given a search term that a user actually entered into a search engine, and then you'll be shown results for that search. Needs met is a measure of how well the result satisfies the needs of the query. Now, once again, we have a 5-point rating scale, which at the top is fully meets all the way down to fails to meet. And if you were to go through these definitions, the consistent theme that you'd see is that as we go down the list, we have results that are helpful for fewer and fewer people. At the very top, fully meets, we have this special rating category that you're not going to see very often. Fully meets is a result that would satisfy almost everyone who issued the query and would satisfy them immediately. As we go down the list, to highly meets, we have a smaller group, very helpful for many or most. Moderately meets, helpful for many or very helpful for some. When we get down to slightly meets, we're looking at results that are helpful for a much smaller number of people. And then at the bottom, fails to meet, this is a result that completely fails to meet the needs of the query, and almost all users would need to see additional results. Now, just like with page quality, we have the same sort of resources, and I've already shown you the candidate resources page, but I want to remind you once again that we have the decision tree, which you can use for both page quality and for needs met, but we already covered this, so I won't go through it again. Instead, let's move right on to our key concepts for needs met rating. We have 5 of them again, just like we have with page quality, and you can also think of these as sort of steps that you would take when you are evaluating a result. So let's go through these with a sample task. And over here, we have a screenshot of an actual task that was evaluated as part of Project Yukon. Our first key concept and step 1 in this process is to identify the user intent. So let me zoom in on this and show you that our query was, what is GOAT in football? Now, in this case, the intent is fairly easy to determine. The user wants a definition of this term in the context of football. And once we've made that determination, we're actually on the path towards coming up with the best score for it. Queries sometimes have multiple intents, sometimes they're ambiguous, we're not really sure what they mean. In this case, we have a dominant intent, right? A clear intent that what almost everyone who typed it meant. So that tells us that any rating on the scale is possible. When you have a dominant intent, it's possible that a result would fully meet the needs of almost all users, all the way down to a result that would completely fail to meet everyone's needs. Now, if we had a common intent, that would be what many or some users mean. Well, we'd automatically know that the rating probably wouldn't go above highly meets. Because with common intents, it's just not possible to have a result that would satisfy everybody, because by definition, common intents are only what at most many people mean. Now, minor intents are third category. This is what few users have in mind. They typically would not go above moderately meets. But with this very clear query with a dominant intent, we know any rating on this scale is possible. Next, we're going to determine the type of query that we have. And this is, in this case, we have what's called a no simple query. No simple queries have very concise answers. They can be immediately satisfied with usually 1 or 2 sentences at most. And that is also an important key to what the user wants. With the no simple query, the user wants that quick answer to it. And a no simple query, it often, or at least sometimes, it can have a fully meets result because it's possible to immediately answer the query. If we were to change this query a bit and turn it into what's called a no query, which is one seeking broader information, it'd be very different. So let's say we changed what is GOAT in football to who is the GOAT in football. Well, there's no clear answer for that, right? That's a debatable point. So with that broader no query, there wouldn't be any way to immediately answer it to everyone's satisfaction. But if you look in the guidelines under query types and intents, you're going to find that there are a number of different types that you should be familiar with, like device actions, such as turn up the volume, or even website queries, where the user is searching for a particular web address. Our third key concept is the location of the user. And if we zoom back in on our task, we see that this user is located in Ohio. That's not going to be important for this query. Sometimes the user location is a very big factor. Let's say they were searching for a business and they might want local results. Well, then we'd have to evaluate the result pages in relation to the user's location. In this case, we can just disregard it. Our fourth key concept is the type of result. Needs met results come in 2 basic formats: the special content result block, or SCRB, and the web search result block, WSRB. And we have examples of them over here. Let me zoom in again. This block is a SCRB, a special content result block. And we know that because it has content above the blue URL. Whereas a web search result block has it in reverse. The content is below the URL. And it might not look like a big distinction, but it actually is very important for rating. With the SCRB, we will consider both the information in the block and we can consider the landing page as well. Whereas with the web search result block, we have to disregard this snippet and click on this link, and we will evaluate the result just based on the web page itself. And the reason that's so important is because of our fifth key concept, which is effort. The special content result block makes it a lot easier in many cases to answer the query. For this task, the information in the block provides an immediate answer. It gives a definition of this term that would satisfy almost everybody. There'd be no need to go to a landing page. So this block received the fully meet score. Whereas with our web search result block, since we had to disregard the snippet and we had to load a landing page and then look for the answer, there was extra effort. And for that reason, fully meets was not a possibility. Fully meets has to immediately satisfy the intent. In this case, we did have a strong rating. They allowed moderately meets plus to highly meets. And that was based on how easy it was to find the answer once we loaded the page. In this case, the answer was near the top. Had the answer been at the bottom or difficult to find, there could have been a much lower score. In fact, I've seen examples in which it was so difficult to find the answer to a query that a page received the fails to meet score. So that's a judgment call that you'll develop a feel for as you do practice problems, especially if you look at some of the practice examples in the general guidelines. That will really help you develop a feel for how much effort is too much effort and therefore merits penalizing the score. Okay, so those are the 5 key concepts that we're going to think about as we do these tasks. And our first practice one has the query lows. And before we actually get into it, I just want to show you what a needs met task looks like. Up at the top, you'll have the query. You'll have the user location. In this case, they are in Texas. You'll see the locale listed, but that's actually your location. You are in the English US branch of UConn. So that's not important. It's the user location that you want to look at. And then you have the actual results, which are usually in 2 columns, which each block has a number and letter combination, like L1, R1, L2, R2, and so forth. And that's how we refer to the blocks, by that letter number combination. Now we're going to look at this L1 block. Let me ask you a question about the query though first. For this query lows, what is the most likely intent for this query? Is it A, to go to the Lowe's website? B, visit the Lowe's store? C, to get information about Lowe's? Or D, both to visit the website and to visit the store in person? Let's just take a vote on this in the chats. A, B, C, or D. Let's take your best guess. Okay, we have some votes coming in. It looks like the favorite here is D, both the website and visit in person. And that is correct. This query, it just has the name of the store, and so we can't know for sure exactly what they want. But the 2 most likely intents would be either the website or to visit in person. So with that in mind, let's look at this special content result block. This was placed at L1 on the task that I showed you. And since it's a special content result block, we can evaluate it based on the content actually in the block. I'll let you just look at this for a minute, and then I'll launch a survey question, and we'll take a vote on the best needs met score. Okay, so looks like most of our votes are in. And the best choice here is highly meets plus. Now, we were saying earlier that this is a dual intent query. And this block addresses both of those intents. It has the VIP and the visit in person information, VIP information. It also has a website link, but the website link isn't as prominent as it would be if it were a regular web search result block. So you do have to search for it a little bit. So it's not going to be fully meets. It doesn't immediately satisfy all the possible intents, but it's pretty close to doing that. And that's why it received the highly meets plus score. And I know some of you went a little bit lower than that. You chose highly meets, and that's really close. But this is one of those judgment calls that you learn from looking at the examples. And especially if you go into the general guidelines and you look at the examples of what receives highly meets plus versus fully meets or just highly meets, you'll see that this type of query and this type of result is usually highly meets plus. Okay, I think we have time to try one more practice question or task. This time we have a query, Webster, Texas, register to vote. And this is our block, a web search result block. So I'm going to post this link here. So please go ahead and open up that link. our intent is pretty obvious. The user is looking for information about registering to vote in Webster, Texas. And while you're looking at the page, let me give you a question to think about. By the way, this is the page that you should see once you have it loaded. So a question to think about: is this a your money or your life query? And let's just answer this one in the chat. A for yes or B for no. Is this a your money or your life query? Okay, I see some votes coming in for yes, and that is correct. Voting is one of those things that could have a big impact either on the individual or on society at large. So it is very important that this information be accurate. And when a page is your money or your life, that means we're going to apply a higher level of scrutiny to it. The quality checks and the EAT are going to be more important than they would normally be. Well, you've had a minute to look at the page, so let's move on to question 2. What is the issue with this result? Is it A, inadequate EAT, B, stale, C, ignores part of the query, or D, amateur formatting and appearance? And for this one, you can just go ahead and answer in the chat, A, B, C, or D. Okay, I see some votes coming in. Most of you chose A, inadequate EAT, but the best choice is actually B, stale. This page actually has very good EAT. You might not have noticed, but this is a government page. So this is an official source of information for voter registration. The problem with this page is it is too old. It's stale. Notice that the date on it, I believe, is from 2018. And the intent of this query would almost certainly be for current information. So this page isn't going to be helpful. Freshness, that is a very important concept when we're doing need-to-met ratings. And this is a judgment that you'll have to make on a query-by-query basis. But in many cases, a search is looking for recent or current information. And a result that delivers outdated information often just simply would not be helpful, and users would need to see other results. In fact, this page, it had fails to meet within the accepted range, because almost everybody would have to go to another page to satisfy the intent of that query. Okay, well, we have a few minutes left, so why don't we try to work in one more needs met example. And this time we have a bit of an unusual query, cat herding. So think about what might be the intent of that query. And let's consider this question. Does this result, this was at the L1 block, does this result at L1 fully meet the intent of the user? And we'll just answer A or B, yes or no. Is this special content result block a fully meets result for that query? Right, our votes are in, and it looks like everyone chose no. And that is correct. Cat herding is a bit vague. This block is about a famous commercial that had the cat herding theme. And that is a probable intent, but there are many other possibilities. There, for instance, were some books with that title. It could also be that they're looking for a definition of what that phrase means. this query is helpful for a couple of those intents. It defines the idiom in this text, and it has videos of the commercials. So it's going to be helpful, but it's not going to be fully meets because there are other intents that are not addressed here. All right, let's try one more question about it. And this time, I'm going to give you a landing page. So this is a web search result block, which means the user would, the rater would click on the link, open up the page I just posted, and they will evaluate the score based on the landing page. This was actually the L4 block. So the question I'm going to ask you is, what is the best needs met rating for this result? And I'll give you just a minute to look over that page, to think about those intents, and then I'll launch our survey question one more time. Okay, our scores are coming in, and looks like most of you chose slightly meets for this one. But actually, our best choice is moderately meets to highly meets. And the reason for that is that if you think about the multiple intents, well, this page is helpful for one of those intents, a very common one, which would be to have information about this famous commercial. So it doesn't satisfy everybody by any means, right? There are other possible intents, but this is pretty helpful. And when you have a common intent that is addressed well, you will often have a score within this range of moderately meets to highly meets. Remember, slightly meets, that's kind of a harsh score. That is for a result that would only satisfy a relatively small number of people. But when we're dealing with a common intent, which means there'd be a significant number of people who wanted that information, and we have a result that's very helpful for that common intent. And if you look over that page, you'll see that someone who wants information about the commercial, they would be very satisfied with that. It has quite a bit of information about it. So I would ask you to think again about those brief definitions, and to be highly meets, a page can be very helpful for a common intent. That's enough in many cases to qualify for highly meets, being very helpful for a common intent. And of course, they allowed the range to accommodate different judgments on exactly how common that intent is and how many people would find that particular page helpful. Okay, so well, we are right at time. Before you take off, I do want to remind you that we're available by email. So as I said earlier, if you have any questions about taking the exam or about the study materials or rating concepts, feel free to send in an email. Open up a support ticket. We'll be happy to try to help you. And I'm going to post a link for this. Give me just a second.